People, today I compiled a bunch of fall DIYs for you. Some old, some new, some might not be that great. But who are we kidding? It's probably going to be a good time anyway. How many of you have been lucky enough to come across these gems at Dollar Tree? I almost hit the floor when I seen these joints, so I grabbed two. And for our DIY, we're going to need a little bit of Mod Podge. That's not really a little bit. About a tablespoon, okay? A tablespoon. And then we're going to need some chalk paint, okay? And a little bit of mica powder. I wanted to just create a tiny bit of a metallic-like finish on our pumpkin here. Now, in case you don't know, people, if you mix some mica powder, a little bit of Mod Podge, and some paint, this creates a very thick consistency, like a puffy paint almost. But if you thin it down, you can really get good coverage over top of glass pieces, having to paint over it in layers minimally. Now, make sure you obviously clean your glass, okay? You didn't see me doing here because I didn't do it. But don't do as I do. You know what I'm saying? Do as I'm recommending. Okay? Don't make the same mistakes, okay? I'm not selling this or anything. This is staying in my home, so I wasn't stressing cleaning it, but make sure you clean it so this way your paint just sticks better to the glass. I ended up doing 2 layers on this. I wanted it to kind of be like a wash metallic look, and while that was drying, I took our lid, added a little bit of glue to the top with some messy moss, okay? Messy moss. And then I grabbed a succulent and put the succulent right in the center. I really think this would look nice in different colors. If you had smaller succulents, you could create this a bunch of different ways, but I decided to just dry brush some white on top to give a little bit more contrast onto it. Of course, remix it to what works for you, but I really like how this one came out. People, this craft I'm about to share with you is a little bit of a nightmare. And here's what screwed me. The cardboard screwed me. I should have just used a wood round, but here we go. You're going to need to take some painter's tape if you want to recreate this using cardboard. Create 2 different size circles on your cardboard. I used the larger outer rim and the inner rim, and then I cut them down to size. Look how optimistic I am here waving these. Like, oh, I cut 2 circles. It's going to be great. Because I was excited because I wanted to use these and some of the rope twine stuff that you get from Dollar Tree. Okay, I was really excited. We were going to create 2 different pumpkins. We're going to paint the backgrounds of these. Okay, so this way our silver beads blended in and our little rope blended in. I made sure to match the colors so everything made sense. And just to be clear, this idea is fire, okay? So take the idea and grab you some wood rounds and then just do it that way. Don't use the cardboard. The cardboard, like I said, that's where I got screwed up with, okay? If I did this on wood rounds, especially the thicker ones, I think this would have turned out just fine. This part, I really don't know a better way to go about this part. You're just going to start in a circle, take your glue and spin, spin, spin. Try not to burn your finger off and make circle, big old circle. It might be a little bit lopsided. It was a good thing it wasn't on cardboard because mine was really lopsided. And then I just, cut it to make sure it didn't look horrible. While that one's off to the side drying, I did the same exact thing, just using the other material, okay? Some glue, we put in the center, and then we spin, spin, spin. And at the end of this piece was the very second that I realized these are not going to stand up on their own. So I grabbed some towering tumbling blocks from Dollar Tree, and I just glued them together, okay? I wasn't getting fancy schmancy here. Make sure you use your wood glue if you want these to last at all. And then I'm like, we have our bases. You know what I mean? Bases. Tumbling blocks make amazing bases. So we got 2 pumpkins. This is going to be great. These are going to be super cute. Now in my mind, I fixed the problem. I'm like, we got a base. This is going to be fine. I've made stuff like this before. I still hadn't realized how thin the cardboard was and that the weight of the material is going to push this. They're not going to sit on here. It don't matter how much messy moss I plop on this joint. They're just not going to sit on the messy moss. Again, I'm still really optimistic at this point. I'm like, these are going to be just fine. I'm putting a nice little load of glue in here, and then here it is. Seriously? Stay. It's never for my lack of trying that things don't work out. It's the ideas that don't kind of make sense with the end result most of the time of the bridge I'm trying to create to make it happen. I used a tumbling block to kind of put a band-aid on this situation, but I have no faith that that's going to really hold for any length of time past the reveal, mostly because the tumbling block is on top of the moss and it's not really attached to the base. If I would have did it before, I would feel a little bit fuzzier inside. Because I was so hung up on creating the idea and giving the idea to all of you, I carried on. If you have some green burlap, this would work as well. I just had it in the ribbon. So I cut off some little leaves, you know, some little shapes of leaves. I even cut down some gingham ribbon so I could create a little bow. People, I don't do bows, okay? I was really going all out for this. This is why I don't do cardboard anything on this channel, really, because every time I do, it's a shit show. Last up, I took these little wood cork pieces that I'm using. They come in a bag at Dollar Tree and I glued them on the top, okay? And this is another part where I'm like, there's no width on this thing. I don't know what I'm trying to accomplish. So even that was like wobbling backwards. See it? I'm like, oh, God. There's no width. Sometimes you need a little girth in your projects. I'm sorry. All right, people. So without further ado, how cute are they? They're flipping cute. They'd be even better if they had their own wood rounds, but oh my gosh, the idea is fire. I think they're super cute, but they're not gonna last. We're gonna start off by using this 1x1 and clamp it on down into our saw. You can purchase these for 98 cents a linear foot at Home Depot, or grab it at your scrapwood pile like I did. I cut these down into various sizes, and in case you want to cut them the exact sizes I did, I made 2 at about 4.5 inches, 2 at about 5.5, and the center one is the largest at 6 inches. You can paint these whatever colors you want. I'm using a white, a light blue, a dark brown, which I'm using the Antique Waverly Wax for, and then I'm leaving the very center one just a neutral. I am taking this little extra piece that I had spare laying around in a pile somewhere and putting a little bit of Antique Waverly Wax on that because that's going to be our stem. And to rustic the pieces up, I am just sanding them down with a 80 grit piece of sandpaper. Then it's time to assemble our piece. Now there are several ways you can connect these to get a good bond. I am going to go the easiest route and just toss some wood glue in between these joints, staple it on the back, and clamp them together for a few hours. I do recommend, if you're new to this and you're not fuzzy inside with your dry times with your wood glue, leave it 24 hours just to be safe before you go messing with it. I am super gentle when I do anything with these if I'm only going to come back 3 to 4 hours, but you also have to keep in mind I'm filming it for you. So I only have so many days that I can actually work on these and editing and doing the voiceovers. So I have a light hand after 3 to 4 hours, but some pieces I just don't trust and I still will less than 24 hours when I'm filming. And next we're gonna bring in our stapler and make sure, because here I almost said it again, make sure that this sucker is facing the right way before you go stapling your pieces together. And remember, at this point, even if you're stapling from the back, your piece is going to fold down like an accordion from the front if you do not clamp these together and let that wood glue dry. I've had people say, because they have not seen me hammer it in, but you can see some of the nails don't go straight through. I do try to show you guys all the struggles on a regular basis, but sometimes, because I have so many struggles and things happen all the time, shit happens, right? I have to cut some pieces out, but it does happen to me just like with this. So I just take a hammer and I just hammer them suckers on down and you're good to go. Once your piece is dry, how you choose to decorate is completely up to you. This is the main concept. Here is the little leftover bits that I had hanging out that I thought would make an adorable stem. And I'm taking some wood glue and some hot glue for an immediate bond to attach to the wood. And if I'm being completely honest, there were 4 little stems initially, and it looked a little funny because it was hanging off too much on the center piece here. So I ripped that one off and just going to use the 3. This was still hanging over a little bit, so just to cover that up, as well as I plan on doing this to begin with, I'm taking some of this raffia. Who loves messing with raffia? Because I don't. I hate it. It's a mess. It's everywhere all the time, and then when you cut it, it's, you know, it's a hot mess. Anyhow, I'm just wrapping this around here and creating a little bow, and I do go in with some glue to make sure that this is going to stay on here and it's not going to pop back off, because without the glue it is not going to stay here. And I'm not using hot glue for that. I'm using tacky glue for that. And I'm also using tacky glue to apply our little button on the center of our little bow. Isn't it just so super cute? I can't even handle it. I thought this was just super adorable. And then I'm taking one of these leather leaves from Dollar Tree and wrapping it around the top of our stem, and just love how this piece turned out. What do you guys think? For this Mod Podge hack, grab yourself a bowl or something you like the shape of and feel you can mold onto it. And then give it a couple taps on the booty. I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm sorry. I just ruined a perfectly good entrance moment. Let's do that again. Next, you're gonna wanna bring in the parchment paper. Or do you? We're gonna get there. I'm gonna explain that in just a second, and I'll take any information you guys wanna dish out with me with that as well. You're gonna need some water, and we're using this hard coat by Mod Podge, okay? Normally, I do a lot of glass art, and you can use fabric and you can manipulate it. One of my favorite ways is to use tacky glue. But I recently discovered this hard coat by Mod Podge. You can use Mod Podge as well, but it's not going to get as stiff as this stuff. And Mod Podge actually has Stiffy to help stiffen up. I can hear my mom now as I'm walking into the craft section, like, what do you need today? I gotta go buy some Stiffy, Mom. I'm sorry. I can make an inappropriate joke out of almost anything, but it really is a product. It stiffens your fabric. So what I was saying about the wax paper or parchment paper is that I struggled to get the tape to even stick to it. You know how like nothing's supposed to stick to this stuff? Not even the tape was sticking to it. So I just kind of flipped it over and prayed, you know. I poured a healthy amount into about a 1/4 cup of water and then mixed this stuff on up to get a really nice consistency. If it's too thick, it's not going to really smoosh into your fabric. It's been my experience, or whatever you're trying to attach onto anything. I struggle with that when you leave your mediums really thick, so watering them down just a little bit allows some play and some absorption, especially when you're using a fabric. To start this off, and you can do this however you want, but I do recommend starting off on the bottom, creating like that base section on the very bottom, and then taking your pieces and attaching to the bottom. This way, when you're all done, you can take one more piece and attach it over the bottom, and it kind of smushes all the pieces together that you put around the piece you attached on the bottom. You'll see how I'm doing it here, and it just gives a good end result. In my opinion, it just kind of holds everything together a little bit better. And you can do this with all kinds of stuff. You can do this with just strips of fabric. You could do this with the little, you know, Dollar Tree leaves. You can do this with florals. It's just going to take a little bit of patience, especially because you're creating a bowl. So you're going to want to also let this sit for a full 24 hours. So the form takes shape. And I will tell you, people, feel free if you want to put color in here. It will color the burlap as you're doing this, so it comes out a different color. Or if you want to wait until this is completely dry and then paint it, you could put some stencils on here and then just seal right on over it. So here is me taking another little square after I'm happy with the shape of my little bowl I've created here, and I'm just putting it over all the pieces that are connected right to the bottom of our bowl in the center here. And then I decided it needed something else. So I grabbed some of this. I never know what it is, but it really just kind of looks like mesh and coral all at the same time to me from Dollar Tree. I wanted to create just like a little, you know, decorative piece on our bowl here. So I cut this thinner, dunked it on in our little mixture, and then wrapped it right on around the center of the bowl. And then I let this sucker dry at 24 hours. And I'm gonna go live for you here real quick, people, because I want you to actually hear this as I'm doing it. This, like I said, it's 24 hours later. Watch this. Like, this sucker is hard, okay? Like, it is ridiculous how hard this thing is. You can beat it on the wall and it is just not falling apart. So you want to create something, that Mod Podge, that hardening Mod Podge is absolutely ridiculous. This bowl turned out super flipping cute. For this little scarecrow head we're about to build, I'm taking this 4x4 that's seen better days. So, when I was learning to cut wood, I made mistakes, people, and this was just tossed and forgotten about in the rubble. Okay, we all got to start somewhere. But today it's going to become a scarecrow, and you can pick up these 4x4s to cut down at Home Depot for $9.88, and it's 6 foot long. And various craft stores also have cubes you could do this with. I'm taking these two colors to blend to get our scarecrow pasty color-ish, because to me it's more like a yellowy old looking color. That's what a scarecrow looks like to me. And then I'm sanding it down to prep for us to be able to paint and draw on the wood. If you are not good at drawing or sketching, get yourself some stickers. You can go to any craft store and buy stickers that are like a face. This is nothing special. I'm just taking a pencil and I'm just kind of etching out what I want to put on here. And then I'm just going to go in with a Sharpie and a little bit of paint and fill the pieces in. That's it. And this is usually the part where I would just skip to showing you guys the face, but I have been getting a lot of comments lately where people want me to go into more details with things. I am going to start having a tutorial series coming on the channel where we will be doing more things like that, doing wood, decoupage, little details that I do not sit and etch out in every single DIY video, because as most of you know, you got to keep retention up in YouTube, and I got to keep the videos flowing and going, but these are going to be a little bit more detailed and drawn out. And I thought, let's start with just leaving all the details of drawing in our little scarecrow face, so this way you guys know exactly how I did the entire process. To create our cap, I wanted to use something different, so I picked this up at Dollar Tree. It is just a table runner, and I'm going to use the very end piece here. It's kind of already like a cone, and you can cut the strip that is down at the end, and it still holds its little cone shape. I'm leaving the back kind of long and fraying around the edges just so it looks, you know, older. And we want to hide the back of the block because it's kind of jagged. I mean, I could have sanded it down, but I'm being a little lazy where that's concerned, and nobody's going to see it anyway. And to attach everything, I'm going to use tacky glue. It is honestly my favorite thing to use as a medium when I'm doing any type of fabric. It works. To give our cap, the inside, a little floof, I'm taking some extra fabric and I'm just stapling it on down to give us a little meat in there. And I'm kind of just wiggling our little cone piece around and seeing what works. I did not want this right on the top. I don't want to make it look like a witch's hat. I wanted it to be off to the side and short and wonky. That is the look I was going for. And once I got that into place, I also stapled that down. Between the staples and the tacky glue, this should not go anywhere. I'm going to use these ribbon bits for our scarecrow, like a little, I don't know, wrap around the bottom here. It was not easy. Them staples were in there. So I finished pulling them off camera, and I'm taking some raffia and shoving it down into our tacky glue, cutting the pieces up, and then more staples, adding more staples. So this way our pieces don't go flying anywhere. At the moment I'm creating this, I'm creating it to resell it because I do own a vendor space and fall's coming, and I also have a website, so I do sell pieces there. I was not sure where I wanted to end up, but I knew I wanted to just make sure that I built this little piece so it wasn't going to fall apart wherever it landed if I was keeping it or someone purchased it. And to make sure that happened, tacky glue and staples are always great ideas when you're using fabrics and woods. And I put little buttons over the staples. Look how cute they are. This little piece is absolutely stunning. I love this. What do you guys think of the little scarecrow? I don't know about you, but I could literally spend hours on Pinterest. I get so much inspiration from that site. So that's why these next few pieces we're going to be checking out, they're inspired by Pinterest. When I seen this adorable little piece, I'm like, I know what we're going to do here. Bring in some of Dollar Tree's wood pallets. These are one of my favorite things to make wood DIYs with at Dollar Tree. And yes, I know Dollar Tree has scrap wood. I could have totally grabbed one, people. I could have and made you a nice little wood block, but you don't really want to be bored with exact dupes, do you? I like to make Pinterest inspired dupe pieces. Well, really inspired dupe anything. I also decided to get a little wild here and take some of this Key West to another palette. So this way we had 2 pumpkins instead of just one. This idea was just too cute for me to just make you one orange pumpkin, okay? I had this large stencil that looks like a camera. Pretty cool, right? With different little shapes and, you know, flowers on it, and decided that I'm going to use different sections of our stencil to create different little spots of stenciling on our palettes. And I also decided that I was going to have the palette pumpkins going 2 different ways, one long ways and one wide ways. That way, how you say it? Tall, short, fat. You know what I mean? If you're not that great at stencils, I do have a how-to stencil tutorial. I can pop that down in the description box for you to check out. But what's most important is mainly your loading and offloading. If you make sure you get a lot of paint on your brush, and I'm using a stippling brush for this, and then get most of it off to where it's a dry brush, you can really avoid any bleed through underneath your stencil. I had some of these little branch bits that came in a pack from Dollar Tree from last year. Just stuck them right on the top of these. Making banners is not something I do very frequently, so suck this one on in, people. You're gonna need a book, and I got a pretty big one from Dollar Tree, and some leaves. I grabbed these. You could use, of course, whatever ones you want. And we're gonna start this off by just ripping out some book pages. If you're a book lover, this might be a little hard for you, okay? It might be a little hard, so just, you know, close your eyes. Look at how nice these gems turned out. That's right. I can clean up some paper, people. Nice and fancy schmancy. And now we're just going to cut, like, you know, little what do you guys call these? Dovetails at the bottom. So, you know, they mimic our Pinterest dupe that we're creating here. I do want to say that for crafter's sake, I just used hot glue to attach our little burlap leaves onto our paper. However, if you go to create this at home, I highly recommend tacky glue and hot glue. I was on a crunch for time this week. I have a lot going on. So I just used some hot glue. I figured you guys would understand and love me anyway. And if you're not familiar with me and you're just coming in and you're like, why is she even saying that? Because I am a huge stickler for, even though we're just crafting and DIYing, I love to teach you guys the best way possible to get long lasting holds in the event that you're selling or gifting people things. You don't want your crafts and DIYs to fall apart once they get them. If you do add the tacky glue on here, be mindful to put this stuff off to the side and let it dry for a few hours before you attach it to your rope, or in my case, we're going to use some of Dollar Tree's ribbon. People, I wasn't even ready to sit and try and rub two brain cells together to figure out how I was going to get this paper on here adequately enough. I guess I could have wrapped the top around and glued the bottom, but I was like, nah, that's too much work. Instead, let's bring in the mini stapler. Look at that. Look at the mini stapler making a little appearance. I know, yeah, it's a small stapler, okay? But it'll get the job done. Are you guys judging my mini stapler? There's nothing wrong with it, okay? Size doesn't matter. It's the way the product, I'm so sorry. It's the way that the staples go into our decor, okay? That's all that matters. I'm so sorry. Like, if your kids are watching, just cancel me now. Anyhow, I stapled these in because I felt like that was just going to be the quickest thing for me to really get these attached and make sure that the paper wasn't going to fall off. But if I was using the rope, it would probably have been best for me to wrap the top of the paper around, then glue the bottom. With this, I could have added another little piece because you're going to see the staples kind of shine through. Now, if you're hanging it up and you're putting like swag and stuff like that over it, you're not going to notice the staples. Popping this in here is going to definitely secure your little banner from, you know, falling apart. I really like using staples when I'm doing stuff like this. It just kind of like takes the stress off my mind when I'm doing fabric and attaching other pieces to fabric, because I don't use, you know, a sewing machine and stuff like that. I can do like hand sewing, but really I don't want to do all that. Like, I really just don't. So this is just quicker for me. And if you don't like the staples shining through, grab an extra little piece of ribbon or rope and just glue it right on the top there. People, if I'm being honest, I love these on Pinterest. My version, not so much. Mainly because I wanted to try to make something work that I don't think did in the end. Like these eggs. These little eggs I had from Dollar Tree that were randomly sitting in my storage area for no reason at all. Not with the egg stuff that I have for Easter. Just hanging out. So I was like, let's trim these down to make them look a little bit like a circle. And I really like the slats in them. So I'm like, this could be good or this could be bad. So I just trimmed the piece off with my wire cutters. It's MDF. I grabbed two colors thinking, you know, let's get us a nice pop of purple in here with this pretty orange. But to alleviate having to do many layers, I did put a coat of Waverly's white chalk paint on here for a nice primer. It only took one coat of this, and it also only took one coat of our paints. However, I did not like this purple at all, so here I come with this purple, praying that it's going to fix. I'm like, just changing the color is going to make it all better. No, it didn't. But I carried on because in my mind, once I got these all together, you know, took these little Dollar Tree laser word cutouts, applied them onto here, it was going to look just fine. However, it didn't. It didn't look just fine. Now, I don't know if it's because I didn't sand off the edges and round it more, or it's just the way the words were, but I decided to then take some of Dollar Tree's nautical rope and glue all around the sides. In my opinion, this saved it just a little bit. I mean, these are okay, but I really want a redo. These little live edge wood rounds are flippin' adorable with these painted pumpkins. I was like, oh, we can do this. I got some of those live edge wood rounds from Dollar Tree. So I grabbed one and thought, let's just paint one pumpkin, okay? Because I can get extra with the painting and I might spend 2 hours just painting this pumpkin. But you at home, you make as many of these as you want. You know, you can create as many different colors and, you know, variations with size as you want. But they definitely have these at Dollar Tree. And they have other little circular round pieces that you can pick up for Dollar Tree. So it's a really inexpensive little craft for you to just kind of toss some fall pieces around your home. To go about painting the pumpkin, I did like a center and then I did like 2 outer layers, a little bit larger, you know what I mean? And then I took some black and some brown, mixed them up, and started to create our top area and our bottom area. And people, if I'm being 100% with y'all, there's definitely an easier way to go about painting pumpkins. I don't know why I was being so difficult, and I don't know why I was being so overly critical of myself here, but I decided to go in between the gaps and start shading and blending and then creating different effects on the pumpkin. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've got myself into a pickle here, and little did I know an hour went by and I'm still painting this pumpkin. As time went on, I decided, you know, Brandy, this is enough. You know, I started to hunker down on myself. I'm like, it's a pumpkin. It's, you know, it's not that serious, Brandy. It's a cute little piece. You know, enough is enough. And then I was like, nah, we gonna bust out the clay. And people, at this point, you might be asking yourself, Brandy, what is the clay for? Well, you know, I wasn't overly critical of the painting enough, so let's make a 3D stem on this joint. So I took some of my clay. It was a little crusty musty. So I just spritzed a little bit of water onto this joint and molded it on up, giving it some life. I laid it down on the top of the pumpkin, and again, this is a little time consuming. I took more little pieces of the clay and started molding it up and spritzing water into it with a clay tool and smooshing everything together ever so gently, because of course it's such a tiny piece, so it's very fragile as you're trying to mold it onto something. But keep in mind, a little bit of water when you're working with clay, it goes a long way. When I was happy with the shape I kind of had going on here, I took the clay tool and just kind of really started scoring over it to give it the appearance that it's a real piece of wood. People, if you want to skip this and just drop a little stem on there and just paint a little stem, you do you, okay? I don't really know what was wrong with me for this particular project, but I just had to be super flippin' extra and take 3 hours making this pumpkin. I used wood glue on the back of the clay and then pressed it down onto the top of the pumpkin, and I allowed this to dry for an hour. That was also included in my 3 hours, you know, that it took me to make the pumpkin, was letting this dry for about an hour. You want to make sure you let your clay dry longer, but you know, I was on time crunch because I'm creating content for you, so I put it in front of a fan. An hour later it was dry enough for me to paint that stuff on. I did use a couple different brown variations to kind of, you know, bring this out just a little bit, and then put some greenery and a little floral piece right at the top. And people, truth be told, I would do it all again. I love how cute this piece turned out. It's so flippin' adorable. I don't always use the iron-on method, but when I do, and if I'm going to do it with fabric, you best believe I use some fabric Mod Podge. I had one of these plain wood rounds from Dollar Tree, and I'm like, this is totally perfect for this project. And I had this adorable fabric that I just picked up from Dollar Tree recently, a little shopping trip. That's right, the mushrooms are starting to grow on me. Now you're gonna need a lot of Mod Podge, whether you're doing napkin or whatever, you're gonna need a lot whenever you're doing the iron-on method. So I put a nice juicy layer on this wood piece of our fabric Mod Podge. I let it dry. It took about an hour and a half to completely dry to where I was comfortable ironing it. And now it's time to bring in the iron. People, if you're not familiar with the iron-on method and decoupage, it is one of the best ways to get a wrinkle-free look whenever you're trying to attach a napkin or fabric onto a surface. However, you need to use a lot of it because it has to dry, and then you're going to take a material, put on top of it, and use an iron to activate that medium to attach to your fabric or your napkin or paper, whatever, you know, whatever you're decoupaging. It just works really, really well. It kind of like melts in there, and it also gives a nice long-lasting hold. Now, if you have ever, and I mean ever, sanded fabric down, it is no easy task. So I decided to use scissors to trim around the edge. And I say this because this right here is an 80 grit piece of sandpaper. And I am just going around the edges here trying to get it off, just to share with you the difficulty that it takes some hand grip strength when you are trying to sand fabric down to make your edges look nice and smooth. So I just chopped mine down with some scissors. I added our little thankful piece on the front here, and it's absolutely adorable. This was one of my favorite pieces that I seen on Pinterest, and I'm like, this is pretty versatile. We can do a lot with this. I had a bag from Dollar Tree of these little wood rounds. I'm like, let's do one with 2 and one with 3. We're gonna need a base because these are heavy. So I grabbed some large popsicle sticks and just gonna, you know, chop 2 little bases down for these. You could use whatever you want for a base, tumbling tower blocks, you know, a little piece of wood, whatever, and make sure you're using some hot glue and wood glue to attach these. You'll see me just using hot glue on here for crafter's sake. I am just using these around my house, so I wasn't worried if they were going to end up falling apart if the hot glue didn't hold together. I'm also staggering these a little bit instead of just kind of putting them right on top of one another, because instead of them kind of going straight up, I wanted them to be sideways and have their own individual stems kind of popping out the sides. The other downside to using these is you can see it's kind of flaky around the edges. Sometimes as I was putting them on, the glue was just sticking to the flaky bits. So, you know, I was really happy when it finally settled and everything held together. I painted the 2 pieces white and I painted the 3 pieces in orange. And yes, it's pumpkin colored. I really wanted to emphasize that these little pieces were kind of tilted. So I took a tiny paintbrush with a little bit of brown and just created a center and then highlighted around the top where the stem was. For the stems, I'm taking some of these small beads and I'm going to just drop them in this bag with a tiny bit of paint. I don't do this all the time because sometimes it takes longer to dry when you use too much paint. So I used the minimalist amount of paint and then just rub the beads around to get some paint on them. I know that a lot of people like this method, but for me, if there's a lot of paint in there when I'm rubbing the beads around, there's just clumps of paint everywhere, and then it just seems to take a long time for them to dry. But since these were so tiny, this worked perfectly. I also decided to stagger the stems for a little bit of character. These were so cute. I don't know why I just fell in love with these. Like I said, I felt like the idea was really versatile, but I also thought that these needed a little something extra. So I took some greenery and just glued it around in different little sections. And then I staged these next to a little decor piece I created using my TDS Decoupage Paper. This is one of my favorite fall theme wood rounds that I found on Pinterest, and I'm like, Dollar Tree has these new wood rounds I can kind of incorporate into this. I have an awesome idea for this piece. And we're going to need some popsicle sticks to create our little, you know, our little wood banner thing. And let's not forget our napkin, because, you know, we need a napkin on this joint. Now, I didn't have a Hello Fall, but I did have a harvest. Okay, I did have a harvest. So I'm like, we're going to just use this. First things first, I had to make sure that I put our little popsicle sticks in the right place and make sure that they were large enough that they were going to accommodate the size of our word here. So I took a little painter stick and just measured things up, put a little line where it made sense at the bottom, and then I did the same exact thing for the top. If you have never decoupaged a napkin, it's always important to get those sneaky layers off your napkin, because you want to just use the top decorative layer. It is really hard to get Mod Podge to attach through any sneaky layers to hold on our decorative layer. It can be done. Oh, it can be done, but it's a little tryesome. People, there is such a detailed section around the bottom here. I'm taking a little bit of water on a paintbrush, and we are going around tracing that lasered pop out of the pumpkins and then pressing it down to separate the napkin to just allow us a shape that fits perfectly around our pumpkins. I'm not gonna lie, this is gonna require some patience, all right? I might be making it look easy, but we're at 6 times speed here, okay? That's all I'm gonna say about that. When I was done with the bottom section, I then drew a line right where our print flipped upside down. So this way I could have that meet up with where our little popsicle sticks are gonna go, and then I could flip it right side up so we could use this portion at the very top of our wood round here. When I was happy with those, I just kind of tossed them to the side because they got to dry anyway before we can go Mod Podging them up. They had water all on them. And I painted the inside of the pumpkins. Now, this was the only one that really popped out, so it was super easy to just kind of stay in the little laser cut and paint our pieces. The other two, not so much. I also made sure to kind of add a little bit of shading, and you can skip that step. Like if you don't want to add shading, obviously don't add shading. I just decided to pop a little bit in there because hey, why not? I already spent several hours painting another pumpkin this day. Well, not several hours painting, but you know, it's too much time on one project. However, I thought these turned out pretty good. I was really happy with the end result here. I was like, this is nice. To apply our napkin, I'm just going to use some matte Mod Podge and a fan brush. I like to use fan brushes whenever I'm using a napkin because they're super thin at the tip, and it allows me to really smoosh them in there when there's sections that are attached and there's not. First, though, I had to take this tiny little piece to really get in around these crevices to meet up with the fan brush. So this way I didn't get Mod Podge all over the sections that I didn't want it. So we didn't have napkin bits attached all over on the pumpkin where we didn't want it. So this was a little tedious because I also like to make sure that my sections of my napkins meet up before I start applying another section of the napkin. So I had to create like this line that made sense to me where I was going to stop and then start again. And here's one of the reasons, like I said, why I love the fan brush, because you can really push it up in where this ends and get a nice seal attached right up to where your last attachment was with the napkin decoupage. To press it down, I grabbed my little sponge. This is a dry sponge, and I'm just going to plop it right on down and press the napkin in. It's also going to absorb any Mod Podge that is coming through the napkin. So this way we have a nice little bonded section. Once this dried up a little bit, I decided to just kind of pull off some of our edges where we were putting our popsicle sticks. So this way we could get to business. I painted those a brownish black color and then set them off to the side to dry, and then went ahead and painted all our little lines around our pumpkins here. And I'm taking different colors, really brown, black. You guys probably can't notice on the camera, but I noticed, okay? I noticed. And I decided to do the front pumpkin a brown, and then bring on in a permanent black magic marker to do the lines around the other two pumpkins. For me, I felt like this was just going to give us a little bit more depth with the color variations, and I also felt like I might have made a little bit of a mess if I tried to paint in between these lines. By this time, our little wood pieces are all dried up, so I just lined them right on up where we had them all sectioned off to go. And I do want to quickly say, because I get asked this often, do you go over and seal the decoupage? Yes, but I wait for it to completely dry before I put a layer over top. I trimmed around the popsicle edges to make sure that they were rounded with our little wood round here, and I felt like something was missing. So I grabbed some little trim pieces that I had here. Unfortunately, I didn't have enough. So I had to kind of wing how I wanted this to go. So I put this one on the bottom, and then I took the smaller piece and cut it into two pieces because I knew I was putting a messy bow on the center of the top of this. So that was going to hang down and cover the fact that we did not have any of the trim. Now you, of course, obviously put two pieces. If I had a long enough piece, I would have just put, to go across the whole thing. But, I didn't have that, so I'm working with what I got here. I was recently sent an awesome little box with a bunch of goodies in it from a subscriber. Thank you very much, Rhonda. And one of the things I talk about very often is I am horrible at bows and etc., etc. So she was kind enough to send me this awesome bag along with a bunch of other stuff that just had cut up little pieces of fabric, which is amazing because my favorite bow is a messy bow. So I schmoozed around in here, grabbing a couple pieces that I thought would look cute with the other pieces that I was going to cut up. I grabbed some Dollar Tree ribbon, I grabbed some burlap, and then I just kind of started pulling each piece on top of each other. And I grabbed a stapler and started stapling them. You guys can always attach, a lot of people use the little wire pieces, the floral wires, but staples work just good for me. And I just started stapling this right in the center. I added a little flower on the top, and I love how this turned out. For this decoupaged wood piece, we're going to need a 1x10 piece of wood for this, and I'm only cutting a couple inches off. I want the length more so than the height, and I did take a little bit of sandpaper and nip the edges around the front of our piece. For anybody that wants to know the actual length, it is 3 inches tall. And really, you just want to cut it so your little wood slice, we're using an owl, fits on there perfectly. I stained this with Antique Waverly wax. I saved you that. You're welcome. And then we're going to decoupage our napkin onto our little wood slice. You can use a leaf for this. Whatever wood slice you want to put on this, it is entirely up to you. You could also use regular paper if you want. I just wanted to use the napkin, and this little happy fall, y'all, fit right in there perfectly, so I was super excited to get this going. When you're decoupaging a napkin, you want to make sure you get all your extra layers off and just use the top sheet of your napkin, and then you want to make sure that you apply less is more. I always say this with a napkin. Don't overdo the Mod Podge. It will easily break your napkin, and I love going in with a sponge and applying pressure gently in our small sections that we're doing the Mod Podge. It just works out well for me. It gives me the most flawless finish that I can get without having to do the iron-on method. If you want absolutely no creases, iron-on method is the best. Once your piece completely dries, go around, and if you want to use your burn methods, you go right ahead. I am not always trying to burn my house down, so I like to sand off my pieces to create a little bit of a depth with our owl from the wood piece. I am tracing around the edges with a little bit of white paint, and then I'm going in with Mod Podge to seal it completely off. I get asked often if I do this, and yes, I do. I always go over my decoupage with another layer just to be safe, to make sure that our napkin is protected. And I can't stress enough, make sure that your napkin is completely dry before you do this part, because if you go in before it is dry, it is possible you can oversaturate the napkin and it will end up ripping while you're trying to seal it. Say hello to my little garden gnome. Well, this sucker really isn't little. It's kind of big. It's like, you know, over a foot. I picked this up from Aldi's for like $8. I seen it. I was like, it has to come home with me. And it needs a base of some white everywhere we plan on decoupaging. This is going to help the napkins that we're going to apply onto this for the designs to just pop out. While that's sitting off to the side drying, we're going to take some clay molds and we're going to take my favorite paper clay, and we're going to create a few little accents to attach onto our gnome. My Amazon affiliate link is down in the description box. It does have the paper clay. This is my favorite clay to use. Feel free to use whatever makes you fuzzy inside. I just personally like this clay. I struggle with hand grip strength. It's super easy to mold even after it's set for a little bit, and I can sand this down. So I really like using it even on furniture pieces. The me in the video wasn't sure what pieces I wanted to use, so I just made a bunch. Here are the 3 napkins that we're going to be pulling different sections from. In case you can't tell, I wanted to kind of keep the green as the one color that kind of tied everything together. And full disclosure, people, okay, it took me about 6 hours to create this piece. I know what you're thinking, but if you love decoupage, it's a good idea. First up, I'm gonna start with any sections I want painted, and we're gonna use these grays on the beard. I'm also gonna take some black as well and put in those little deep sections to give us a little bit more depth in it. And obviously paint your beard on your gnome or whatever color you want, or don't paint any sections. If you want to decoupage your whole piece, you go right ahead. This was just the design that I had thought out and kind of sketched before I started to do this piece. And people, just a little tip, it has been my experience that if you do want to paint something, paint it first, decoupage, and then you can go back and touch up. If I decoupage and then paint, I tend to make more of a mess and sometimes ruin sections that I decoupage, and you really can't go back over that and fix it. But you know, you do what you want to do. I'm just giving you my opinion. I took a couple different tan colors to paint the little nose and our hands, and then I went in with some shading. Nothing too fancy schmancy, just, you know, to add a little bit of depth with those pieces. And then I had to come back in with some of that gray and touch up around the edges of our little tan paint, because I made a little bit of a mess. Since part of this video is me trying to get as many projects as I could in one day, I had to be very purposeful with creating this and allowing things to dry, especially because I knew this was going to take me almost all day. I spent some time ripping up the napkin and trying to put little sections, because I know I wasn't going to be able to just do this in one piece. There were too many curves going on, so I was purposeful with tearing up little sections to make sure I had designs of the napkins, so I didn't like just rip sunflowers in half and then you couldn't see a whole piece. I decided not to paint the bird and the trim around the gnome. I was not sure what colors would go really well once I had the napkins on here, and I didn't want to just paint them colors, get the napkins on here, and then have the colors not make sense. So I just decided to wait. And if I'm being honest about that, I was kind of nervous because I did not want to mess up the decoupage with the paint once I had it all done. So tips for decoupaging something that is not completely flat. You're going to most likely need to tear your napkin as you're applying your piece. You can wrap it gently, press it down gently, and also use the cling wrap to help reduce the wrinkles. but be mindful as you're pulling the cling wrap around whatever type of curves you have, because if it's super wet, that cling wrap is just going to rip your piece and move it as you're moving the cling wrap along. I always try to use really thin layers of Mod Podge and go little by little. As you can see, it took me a long time just to do this little cap right here. And then once I had the largest piece on right in the front, so this way the bulk of the design was right there, I started piecing the smaller sections that I had torn out in the back so it looked like one piece. And people, don't be afraid of any excess overhang. See how like around the rim there's extra napkin? I don't have any Mod Podge there. So that means that the part of the napkin that's sitting there, it's not going to stick there at the end of the day. We're going to go back and clean all this up. I'm going to show you in just a couple minutes. And right here, my friends, is one of the reasons I love using fan brushes. You can have a little bit of Mod Podge on that and go around all the edges. It peels them back just so gently, and then you can plop a little bit right there and gently fold the napkin right on over. It seals those edges up super tight, especially whenever you're doing a little piece project like this one. Once that cap was dry, it was time to move on to the little gnome booty. And we needed to lather that sucker on up with a nice amount of Mod Podge all up in that crease from top to bottom. And I did that actually from the neck down. This way we could put the bulk of our napkin right on the biggest piece of real estate that we had. I'm so sorry. Right on the biggest piece of real estate we had back there, so we could just piece together around the sides. And I made sure to do my due diligence and press it up in there so we had a nice wedgie. I'm sorry. Okay, now moving on. I love this napkin, but we're only going to be using the green part for our shoes. I want it to keep the little gold piece at the very bottom of our gnome shoe, and then have the design take over kind of the entire top. This was the most time consuming. You would think that the arms were, but oh no, these shoes were. And mostly because I had to really go around the beard and do this tiny section by tiny section, keeping the gold piece aligned with the actual sole of the bottom of the shoe. And you'll notice I don't have my fan brush in here. I have a tiny synthetic brush that I'm using. It's still, the bristles are super soft, just like the fan brush that I use. And it's also tiny enough for me to get in these little places that we have to kind of push the napkin in here. I did an entire row of this and then came back in and pieced little sections of the print on the top of the shoe. When all those sections dried, before I started the sleeves, I'm like, let's take a little clay tool, well, I used a couple really, with a little bit of water on a paintbrush and go around our edges. So I just went and took that water around the edges, so once the Mod Podge stopped, then the napkin was just hanging there. This allowed me to take those clay tools, get in those creases, and pull off any excess napkin where the paint began or the next section began. And before I put the sleeves on, I wanted to do this so this way the sleeves actually overlapped the flower print and met up with the beard. I hope that makes sense. This is extremely time consuming, so prepare yourself if you go to do a project like this. This is probably going to take you the largest amount of time, and mostly because even though you're separating this with the water, sometimes the napkin can bunch in little sections, and you really got to make sure you adjust for that. Even though there's no Mod Podge, there's like little napkin ball pieces you want to smooth out before you carry on to apply your next layer or to put your sealer over or do your paint. For the sleeves, I kind of did the same thing I did with the bootay area. And I took a big section over the largest part of the arm and then pieced together the smaller sections around the sides. I was so happy when I got to this point because, as you can imagine, you're letting this dry, you're working on it, you're letting it dry, and then it's like you're starting to put the finishing touches on it, coming in, fixing the paint, adjusting to where the decoupage ends, and it just really started coming alive for me at this point. And it was also about this time that I realized what colors I was going to do the trim and our little Tweety bird, which I decided on a deep brown for the trim and a little yellow for our bird. I painted up off camera our little clay pieces that we had molded, and I used tacky glue to attach them. And because I can't leave well enough alone, I decided to take some gold gilding wax by Dixie Belle and go over our bird and our trim. I see these pieces all the time at Dollar Tree and I never grab them because I'm like, oh, I'm going to have to paint them. But these yellow ones, honestly, you don't need to do anything for fall. You can just shove some stuff in there, like some potpourri or some, you know, floral pieces or whatever. You know, take the idea and remix it. But I'm taking some of these potpourri pieces and I'm just sprinkling a little in the bottom of these jars. I also really appreciate the fact that the color is a little bit different once they get in there, okay? You might have to poke them down a little bit to get them in there. And then look at this sucker. That looked like a dog treat to me. I was like, that looks like something Harley to eat. Now, I'll be the first person to admit I am horrible at florals and wreaths and centerpieces, all those things, okay? But I feel like I did a really good job picking things that contrasted well to pop through these yellow vases. I liked the way I could see through these. However, one I wanted to do different than two, and I had these awesome LED lights I get off Amazon, and I grabbed these because if you ever tried shoving that battery pack on the ones that you get from Dollar Tree into stuff that has small openings, yeah, it's a pain. And I love these because I can pretty much put that little battery pack in anything and conceal it. You don't even know that it's there. And yes, if you have the right battery, you can replace the batteries on these, which is another reason why I really like them. So for the third bottle, I just took some white burlap and wrapped these little fairy lights around them. And then took some of this fabric that I grabbed from Dollar Tree and cut a couple strips. So we could just wrap a piece around the neck of all three bottles, tying them together even though one was different. And I finished it off with a little button right in the center, a dovetail trim on the edges, and florals in our one bottle. For our table centerpiece, we're going to need two of these thin pumpkins and a palette. This is going to serve as our base and centerpiece to hold our two pumpkins together because these are thin as I don't know what, people. I don't know where my extra 25 cents going, but it certainly is not going towards making sure my pumpkin wood pieces are thick because they're not. They're so thin. Now, thin, but not thin enough to make this easy for me to slice the bottom of this pumpkin off. This is dangerous. So dangerous. Let me just express to y'all how scared I was for my life while I was trying to cut the bottom of this off. Now, if you have an easier way to go about doing that, let your girl know. Help me out. Because I struggled and I don't want to have to relive that nightmare ever again. I got it cut down thin enough that I could just snap it back and pop the piece off. And then I took sandpaper, kind of smooth it down. And then you guys are like, Brandy, what are you doing? I wanted the pumpkin to be a little bit shorter in the front so we could see the front and the back as our centerpiece. So I just cut about 2 inches off the bottom of the front section. And then I glued them together. And I'm coming back in with a stapler. Of course. Be mindful as you're doing this because it is super easy to miss. And I also wasn't applying enough pressure, so I had to come back in with the hammer and hammer that sucker in just a little bit. Add some wood glue in there. Also, if you plan on putting heavy things in this, I just use hot glue to immediately attach it because I knew I was using a staple gun. So I felt pretty confident with the hot glue and using the staples. I also did this to the front and the back. I wanted to hide the bottom, so I took some of this metal ribbon you can pick up from Dollar Tree. If your Dollar Tree don't have and you have a Hobby Lobby near you, Hobby Lobby carries it too. And then I applied this Gather Together sign that was on another piece of Dollar Tree fall decor, and it was just kind of scrap laying around, you know, and I thought it would just look really nice on here. This is a nightmare. Using twine to wrap around this stem, it's not easy. It's weird, and it just goes all different ways. Just apply it however you can, people, okay? But it looks nice on your stem pieces. Once I had everything put together, I then came back in with 2 more palettes and attached them on the sides for a finish. I gotta tell you, you would not know I did not purchase this thing from a store. It's absolutely gorgeous. Fill it with whatever you want. I put some florals and a candle in there. For our pumpkin decor piece, we're going to need a bamboo ring and some of these rectangle wood pieces from Dollar Tree and 1 more wood stem. And I'm going to use this pumpkin color for our pumpkin. Why not, right? Now, I think the DIY community this year has been doing one hell of a job giving out pumpkin DIY ideas. And I thought, I haven't seen this idea, and I gotta give you my idea, so here we go. Once you've painted your bamboo ring whatever color you want, you're gonna wanna glue your base together, and you can use whatever base you want. I just have these are from the Dollar Tree. I know that if we put them together, it's gonna make us a nice thick base. Next, we're gonna decoupage this from the Dollar Tree onto our wood base, and you're gonna need so much Mod Podge. This stuff is ignorant. I've decoupaged a lot of things, and I'm here to tell you this stuff pissed me off. I initially started out thin. You know, less is more. This stuff feels like paper. It is not the way to go. It's not going to stick. I'm just letting you know now. Paint this thing, stain this thing. Do not use this stuff. Do not try and decoupage with it unless you have patience and you got some time, because it is not. You're going to have to keep pressing it down, pressing it down, pressing it down. It just kept peeling back off. If I was going to redo this, I would probably use tacky glue. And you can even see here, like, I started trying stuff. I'm taking a clamp. I tried then leaving the other side longer, folding it over, putting Mod Podge on the sides and the bottom, and clamping that down. I ended up putting painter's tape on the bottom of it. See, it's sitting over there, and just letting it sit and dry. I stopped recording. I was getting frustrated. And while I was hoping that that completely dried, I moved on to the stem, which then I was struggling to get the wood glue out of the bottom. I was just having one of them days. I finished the other projects in the same day and went back a couple days later because I had this idea and didn't feel like looking for all the pieces to make it. So once I gathered everything and I sat down to do it, I was just struggling to get the piece together. Once I finally got the wood glue on there, I flipped it upside down like this so I could press the stapler into it and get the staples in. And then the staples were not going all the way in, so I had to come back in with the hammer to make sure that they were in place so our little stem wouldn't move. Now it's time to create our base for our ribbon. So I had this little wood slice laying around, and then I cut pieces of the metal ribbon, and I made each little pop out piece of the bow, and I made our little bottom pieces of the bow, and then we're going to attach all the pieces. And yes, I did this knowing that the staples were going to stick in here. Just grab a butter knife. You'll be able to just pop that little sucker right on off of there. I know it looks painstaking, but I can assure you that this thing is put together really well, and I did not see a better way of making a metal ribbon and making sure that the pieces did not move. Once I had everything stapled on this piece, I know it looks a little gross right now, but we're going to add our little wood flowers in the center. Look at that. I've seen this metal ribbon from Dollar Tree used for a lot of things, but actually making a bow. So I'm like, I'm going to make a bow out of this. I did use a Gorilla Glue gel to pour down in the center there where I attach the flower and where everything meets with the staples, and I add a little leaf piece up at the top there for extra accent. I took this base and cut all the extra of that ribbon off, and it needed something. I really wanted to wrap the ribbon around, but I was not putting up with that nonsense. So I came in with some half circle beads, or I don't know, what do you guys call these? I call them like half beads. And I put all around the base. I use hot glue for immediate attachment, and then I went in with a paintbrush and some wood glue and went around them just to make sure that they're not going to pop off. I made sure all of them were dry before I attached our pumpkin piece, because you're going to bring out the staple gun or stapler again, and we're going to staple them down. And in case you got to hammer the piece, if you do not make sure that those beads are on there, they're going to pop off if you got to hammer anything. So just a little heads up. I finished this off just to cover up the base right there. A little bit of our messy moss and a little word, a little laser cutout word. And that is going to be it for this one. Who wants to make an ice cream sundae with this beautiful glass piece? Too bad we're not making no ice cream around here, but we are going to turn this into a pretty little eye-catching piece. People, do not skip on Target's Bullseye Playground. I grabbed this stuff for $1 from there. Now, mind you, it's moss and messy and it should be free, but that's besides the point. This was also about the moment I realized I was going about this backwards, because I wanted to put a bow on here. So I decided to take that stuff out. Use whatever ribbon you want, you know what I'm saying? I grabbed this from Dollar Tree, and I thought the colors would really just pop out on this with what I wanted to put inside of our little decor piece. So I just sliced off a nice size and then got to business. Now, I am horrible at bows, okay? If you came for some kind of tutorial about how to make the perfect bow around here, you got the wrong channel. I shall defer you to any other content creator in the DIY community but me. And truth be told, as I'm going through this process over the last couple of years, I try to use ribbon that has like the wiry pieces on the edge, so I know once I'm done struggling to make the bow, that sucker is going to hold its shape. And even just cutting little dovetails, I can't even do that right. So it's like, take two. Now it's time to grab our pile of stuff that's on the side and kind of spread it back in here. It actually works. I mean, if you've worked with the stuff, you know it works well. It just makes a mess. And then I grabbed some of this Dollar Tree. I just call this Dollar Tree mesh. I never remember the technical term. And it's literally one of my favorite things from Dollar Tree. It comes in different colors. First, I didn't remember where I purchased it, and then when I knew I got it from Dollar Tree, I bought all the colors because there's a bunch of different little color options. I think it's just a nice filler, and I like the shape of it, and I like that it doesn't have to be perfect, and it can fit into pretty much anything, no matter how you cut it up. It just adds a little something, something. Then grab whatever you want to toss on in here. And the best part about this is you can switch it up every holiday. We didn't hot glue anything on here. It is just a cute little decor piece that you can switch up for every single holiday, and the colors out even throughout the season if you want to. People, I know you see these all year long at Dollar Tree, just like I do, and I could probably do an entire video on just things to do with these. Love the frosted glass. I don't like the fact that the gold is a little messy, so we're going to fix that using some of Dixie Belle's Gilding Wax, okay? If you don't have that, another option is some rub and buff. That will also fix this. But if you have a Dixie Belle retailer and you have access to this stuff, just grab some. You cannot go wrong with holding on to the gilding waxes at all. I have several different colors, and look how perfectly that just matches this. and it goes right on here. And you don't need to seal over this or anything. When you're happy with touching that up, and if you don't want to use gold, use whatever color. You know what I'm saying? DIY it however you want. I wanted to keep the gold. And then I grabbed these stickers. Also because, you know, they're trimmed in gold. And full disclosure, people, and I'm going to also share that with you, these stick really well, I'm not going to lie. They're really good sticking stickers. However, since our shape is kind of circular and you got to bend them, you're going to want to make sure that you seal over these immediately for them to hold their shape, or they will start to pop back off. And the reason they start to pop back off is because the sticker itself is thick. It's like got some plastic in there. It feels like it probably doesn't, but if you have these, you know what I'm talking about. They are thicker. So just seal over them to keep them against your cylinder. And because I like to share everything with y'all, you can see here about an hour after I filmed the reveal, the one side of this sticker popped off. Now, if I would have sealed that sucker on up, I would have been straight. Just because it's cheap doesn't mean it has to look cheap. And just because it's cheap doesn't mean you can't make adjustments so that way it doesn't end up being cheap. These turned out gorgeous. I wasn't kidding when I said I had several ideas for these. And yes, these are the same ones. I just took the sticker off. Okay, give me a break. I'm here to inspire and give you ideas, not go broke in the process. Waste not, want not around this joint. That's all I'm saying. Next, we're going to bring in one of Dollar Tree's rubber on transfers. Look like a piece of wood. If you're lucky enough to get a hold of these, I've literally seen them one time and I grabbed what they had. I wanted to use this as a background to create little tags, basically. So I took the top of a Mod Podge bottle and traced one on the front, sharing that you can actually draw on the front of these and it's not going to affect your design. Or you can flip these over and do the same exact thing. Either way, you can use both sides to trace out a design and then cut your shape if you do not want to use the whole piece on something. But this way you're able to basically hold on to what you didn't use, and instead of just rubbing on a section and then the transfer is completely wasted. So like I said, waste not, want not around this joint. And the rest is really straightforward. You just rub, and then get something sharp, okay? Because this clear stuff is definitely attached onto this, you know, faux wood design. Get something sharp and then pop off the clear piece, and there you have it. I wanted to add some little accents, so I also had these transfers laying around and just cut a couple of gold little bits to press on the outside to just kind of make it look a little bit more like a label instead of just a little circle thrown onto our candle piece here. And look at that. It really does just kind of give it a little oomph. You know what I mean? I did the same in the opposite corner up on the side, or on the opposite rounded piece, because does it really have a corner? It's a circle. I have not been lucky enough to get a hold of Dollar Tree's fall transfers yet this season, and the ones that I did have, I put them in my decoupage kits because it's more important for me to make sure you guys at home can have access to them. If your Dollar Trees aren't carrying them, I can get them for you in my decoupage kits. So off they went. I'm using this one to just cut out the word fall. And then to give you another option, I was recently sent this really cute stamp kit and thought, let's put a little leaf on here. And of course, oh no, mistakes were made. So I had to gingerly find the alignment for this stamp to press it on here to try to make sure it looked like one piece. It turned out okay. It turned out okay. But the ideas are fire, people. The ideas are fire. Just make sure your lettering isn't all jacked up like mine and your stamp isn't on the half like mine, and you'll be good to go. I love this little dessert cup from Dollar Tree, and I always think to myself, what could we DIY this into if we flip it upside down so its booty is facing us? I'm like, let's bring in some ribbon, let's tie a little bow on here, and let's bring in one of these Dollar Tree chargers. I think this is gorgeous, and the blue on the plate also matches the blue pumpkin that is in the ribbon. So I grabbed my Gorilla Glue gel and I attached it to the bootay of this glass. Let me stop with all that. I put the charger on it and then I shoved some fairy lights and a couple little fall pieces in the bottom for just a little extra added accent, and I love how this turned out. I absolutely love these plain wood plaque pieces from Dollar Tree. And I love that this one had a little pumpkin in it. I had an idea. We're going to keep this simple. I'm keeping it neutral. And I picked this up, this little table runner from Dollar Tree. I used some of it in my last little fall video. It was part of our little scarecrow hat. If you guys have not seen that video, I will link it down in the description box for you. He's so cute. But for this project, we're just going to cut out a little rectangular-ish piece. And then I'm taking and fraying the edges, cutting little, I don't know, triangles in the bottom and just pulling some pieces out, making a mess on my work area is really what I was doing. Just throwing it everywhere. That was such a bad idea. Do not do that. Pull it and then make sure you place it right into your trash can. If you do not want to do this part, leave it alone. I actually like making things look a little worn, even though I'm trying to make it look fancy with this shiny silk material. Look, see the mess? I'm like, oh, bad decisions. Too late, damage was done. To attach our little fabric piece, I'm going to use some tacky glue and I'm going to put that in the four corners of our little piece of fabric. Now you notice me take that little wood piece. That's because I've talked about this before. I'm on a folding table, so this table moves, so the little wood piece helps me kind of get a stable grip when I'm doing things. And as usual, things don't always really go the way I hope they would, and then I fix it later, so here we go. We're gonna bust out the stapler. I'm sorry. Okay, we're gonna take the stapler and we're going to staple down our four corners in the spots that we put our tacky glue. Now, if you notice, I put the fabric a little bit further in than the end. This way I could give it a pocket. See how I'm kind of bending it? And there's a little bit of a mountain in the center there. And then at the very bottom, I'm just going to take and fold it, pinch it, and then put a staple right in the middle there. See, look at me still moving free bits. I tried to tell you, it makes a mess. Put it right in the trash can. So this happened. I seriously underestimated how thin this wood was. So be mindful of that when you go to do this. It's not a huge deal. I just took a hammer and then I pried down the edges, you know, so this way it wouldn't come out of the wood. Do be careful when you're doing this though, because the hammer could easily slip and then you cut your finger. I'm not responsible for any smashed fingers or broken nails, people. But on a serious note, for anybody that's like, why didn't you just hot glue everything? I do reselling, or I give things as gifts, and for me these steps are necessary because I want to make sure that whatever I'm putting together, it is not going to fall apart. And this is what they should look like once you're done prying them down. Now we're going to add our little accents, and this little bow I just love at Dollar Tree. It's one of my like favorite things. I love the colors. I like the blues so in right now. Anyhow, yes, I'm putting more staplers in it. Sure am. Gotta make sure this sucker's not going anywhere. And then I'm gonna take some tacky glue and we're gonna put over top of the little staples at the top, and we're going to attach some buttons. I didn't really feel like there was anything wrong with the little hanger that was on here, except for it was a little plain. So I'm just putting, you know, some little beads on here and I'm leaving them neutral. You color them however you want. Like I said, I was going for neutral. And then I'm just attaching that right back on here. I did feel like this needed a little something where this pumpkin piece was, and took a permanent marker and just really kind of outlined the inside of the area and the outside of the area to bring a little bit more of a high-end look to this piece. Just draws the attention, giving it a little bit more definition. Toss whatever florals you want in here, and I did not glue any of them in there, so if you want to switch them out every single year you can, and you can keep the piece just the way that it is. For these glass tabletop decor pieces, we're going to use some of my TDS Decoupage Paper. And I'm just going to cut cute little pumpkins out to frame inside of these adorable little things that you can pick up from Dollar Tree. Now be careful because the glass is so flippin' fragile, people. It is so fragile. So be careful whenever you're using these pieces from Dollar Tree. Unfortunately, it is also not that easy to get these little pieces off. So I was even nervous doing this that I was going to break the glass. Typically, I like to either tear or use some water to trace around our design whenever I'm doing some sort of decoupage. But since this is going to be a very precise design, I completely cut out around the outline of our pieces. Well, I mean, I did the best I could because it was a little bit of a struggle getting around those florally bits on the pumpkin. For the medium, we're going to be using some of the Deco Art Decoupage in the mat, and I just flipped this tissue paper upside down and traced around the whole inside of our piece. That's another reason that this paper is so awesome. It's not as thin as a napkin, so doing something like this, you are not going to have a huge issue with tearing, and it allows you to place it on a surface without having a ton of Mod Podge seep around the outside, leaving a bunch of smudgy marks. This idea, if you do not want to use decoupage paper, you could absolutely use a napkin, you could use stickers, you could use transfers. The idea is very remixable. Take it and do what you want with it. For those of you that are in love with the prints, I promise I am restocking each month. I am just waiting on the vendors to give me the merchandise, and as soon as I have the prints, I will always let you know when everything's back in stock. We're going to need 3 different size and completely different pieces of glass for this next project, and one that we can make look like a pumpkin. And we're going to need to use that lid, so I'm just unscrewing it, and then I'm painting it a little bit of a mix of a black and a brown. And you can do what you want, but a little tip, use some chalk paint. Acrylic paint is probably going to pop right off that metal. And no, people, we are not going to be painting this. Instead, we're going to grab some things to fill the jar that resemble colors of a pumpkin. So I'm just taking some orange little bits, I'm taking some potpourri and some mesh, and I'm going to layer it inside the jar. And layer it however you want. There was really no rhyme or reason to this madness. I just put it in spots where I feel like you could see the different colors from all angles of the jar. I also want to do the vases completely different. So for one of them, I'm going to use some burlap, and I'm just cutting a little strip off. If you got ribbon, use that. And I'm going to use a little piece of this nautical jute rope. If you want to use twine, by all means. I'm actually unraveling this so I can use the thinner piece. And then we're going to wrap our little piece of burlap around here. You can glue it on here. I recommend tacky glue if you want to adhere fabric onto glass. It works super well. And then we're going to make a wonky knot. And what I mean by that is we're going to tie it once, and then we're gonna tie it again, kind of leaving a decent gap in the center, and then the extra bits on the end are kind of just gonna be flailed to the side. I'm not really sure what anybody else calls them, but that's what I'm calling them. I see them in the store from time to time with their little decor piece. I'm like, I can make that. Now we're gonna take this little leaf, and you can take whatever you want to pop in here, but I'm going to take this little leaf and a little bit of glue and plop it right inside of our hole. I thought putting a little pearl in there, a little gem, putting a little, they even have like little mirrors, you got little floral pieces. There's all kinds of things you could pop right in the middle of this all year long to just jazz up a little decor piece in your home. But I'm, you know, it's fall themed. Okay, it's fall themed. Look, here's me adjusting my wonky edges. But I love how that turned out. It was super simple to do. Our last one's going to be even easier. We're just going to need a thin little piece of twine or 2, how many ever you want to use. We're going to tie it in a knot. And then we're going to grab us some beads and pop right on the edges. What I love about projects like this with these 2 glass vases is we're really just adding some easy accents. If you don't want to glue anything onto these, you don't have to. And you can interchange these out all year long to match with your decor. People, now I want to share a little hack with y'all. I'm not sure about your house and your floral situation, but mine will look like this. I'll have pieces cut up and they are just too short and they don't fit. And I'm like, oh, I gotta buy more florals, or do I? I grab a dowel and then I measure it to size inside the piece, especially if you like the floral pieces that you have and you just feel like they're going to go with whatever it is that you're creating. You can then attach them to the top of the dowel or in the center of the dowel, wherever you want. Take some washi tape that is the color theme that you're going to be using. So this way, when you're looking through the clear glass, it's all one color and it all makes sense. So as you can see here, the top of my florals are that like burgundy brown, and my washi tape kind of matches. And then you just go all the way down your little dowel straight to the bottom with the washi tape, covering up the fact that none of it actually goes together. And I've shared this in my content before, that my mom used to work at a warehouse that created wreaths and floral pieces for companies like Macy's and JCPenney's back in the day. And I learned this little trick from her. So in case you haven't seen this $1 mall stuff from Target's Bullseye Playground, let me share it with you, okay? And yeah, it is messy, but you're just going to take a little bit and stuff it on down in there. You can really use whatever you want. It kind of just hides the bottom of our dowel. Next, grab you a cork of some sort. I'm taking this little wood piece here and then 2 green leaves and attaching it to the back, popping out the sides. And then we're going to take our lid that is completely dry, put a little dollop on the center here of glue, whatever kind of glue you want. Probably a little bit better than the hot glue that I'm just using for the video. And I'm keeping this. This is actually my centerpiece this year. Love how this turned out. Plop that little piece right on top, and we have us a little pumpkin with 2 accented glass pieces to go with it. Dollar Tree glass bowls are so meant for something more than just shoving some food in there. Like to attach them to these little plastic pieces for no real apparent reason. But really the best reason, because I had a napkin that matched it. And I was like, oh, we're going to decoupage this bowl and attach it onto the top of our little LED pillar candle. But I didn't like the color of the candle. And then I'm like, how am I going to turn the light on and off if I attach the bottom? And then there's these little pegs up here. I'm like, we're going to have to figure this out. So, of course, I used all the best practices. I mean, why wouldn't you beat it with a pair of wire cutters? And then I'm like, okay, I don't need to do that because there are these little pegs inside of the candle actually holding this in place, right? So I just snip them suckers right on out of there. Right? No, wrong. Even after I nipped the little tip of them suckers off, it was still kind of glued in there. So one more bang with the wire cutters, and then I can't even hold on to it. Ta-da! Yeah, now it's out of there. Now what, right? Now we just put that sucker off to the side. But not before I had a small candlelight vigil for myself. I don't know what I was doing here. Okay, now down to business, right? Time to get everything glued, decoupaged up. No, I still spent time trying to figure this out. I'm like, the candle doesn't fit in here. What am I going to do? I want the candle to be able to go on the bottom. And I'm like, these little bits are going to stop my bowl from attaching. So we got to get rid of them little nips just poking out right there. So they got to go. So I took the wire cutters and just kind of pop them suckers right off to the side. So the bottom of this would be nice and flat, and we can glue this to the bottom of the bowl and use the top to put in a candle pillar or some fairy lights or whatever. Took me a minute, but I finally figured it out. You're welcome, people. You're welcome. Now look how beautifully this bowl sits on our piece here. Look at this pillar we are creating for our decoupage decor piece that no one asked us to make, but we just felt compelled to do it. Okay, we're going to take some greens. We're going to mix them together, and you want to definitely make sure you got a chalk paint in there. because acrylic's just not going to stick to plastic that well, especially shiny plastic. And you could honestly give this a little sanding if you want. I'm taking a little sponge and just tapping all over this sucker. And this took 3 coats to get a good coverage. And no, I didn't worry about doing the inside. Now while that's drying, because I don't know about you, but I'm tired of looking at that LED piece, it is time to get to business with the decoupage. One of the easiest ways to get those sneaky layers off the top decorative layer is to just find a corner and peel a little section. It will reveal the layers underneath the top decorative layer. You could always use 2 pieces of tape on the end as well and pull them apart, or a little bit of Mod Podge in between your pointer finger and your thumb, and then bloop, 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 the edge will also get the ends off. Lots of good little tips to get them sneaky layers off, but you want to make sure you're just using the top layer of your napkin. To apply our napkin, I'm just going to use some of this Deco Art Decoupage in the mat and a fan brush. And so I have a stable surface to kind of, well, not really stable, but you could put a piece of painter's tape on the top of your little bottle. It'll be a little bit more stable. I'm going to use this other Mod Podge bottle to flip the bowl upside down so I can put our little tears of our napkin in different sections of the bowl. I did tear the napkin off camera, and I made sure to keep all the sunflowers whole. So this way, as I'm going around the bowl with the napkin sections, I can meet up with the last section that I attached and make the entire design look like one piece instead of overlapped sections of napkin, which is a little trick whenever you're decoupaging something and you want the design to just look unison. Try not to overlap the designs. Try to make it look like they connect. I'm taking a dry sponge here and I am just tapping on the top. Whenever you're doing glass, it's not very porous, so the medium will come up through the pores in your napkin, and that can create bubbling, it can create wrinkling, it can create tearing. However, whenever you use a sponge, it actually grabs the medium that comes through the napkin. When I got to the edge of where I was applying the first section, I made sure to go over the end section with the medium and attach the ends down really well. And once they were applied, I then took a little bit of medium right over the edge of the napkin. So this way, the next napkin that I have torn up, I can meet right up on the edge and gently lay it right over the first napkin. So this way it looks like it's connected. I hope that makes sense. And this really just gives the appearance that your bowl is one full design instead of a bunch of cut up little designs. But you decoupage your napkin on here however you want. And this is also really cute if you want to use several different designs. You can make it like a patch type of design. I let this dry completely overnight, and I'm just kind of sharing here with you guys so you can see how the design on our bowl is not overlapping. Like I was telling you, it's like a design versus little sections. I just really wanted to show it to you in its entirety. And I know there are a couple of little wrinkles. I wasn't going for perfect here, so anybody that's got a comment about that, you just keep your comment to yourself. I'm tearing the extras off of our top here, get those little crusty bits off, and then we're going to take some painter's tape and create a rim around our bowl. I get asked a ton of questions about layering paints and napkins and all the things, and here we're going to layer some chalk paint around the top of our bowl to create a rimmed design. And people, don't start me lying, I did pop some of that acrylic paint in there to give us the same color that we had on our LED lights, and I went slightly inside of the bowl. If you want to cover the whole inside of the bowl, you go right ahead. But I wanted lights to be able to shine through our napkin here once this was completely dry for our decorative piece. And no, I did not seal over this napkin before I applied the painter's tape. This actual application is just from the one that we did underneath the napkin. It dries super, super well. I'm going to put our finishing sealer over when we're all done. Just make sure that your napkin is on there extremely well before you go putting painter's tape over it. Otherwise, that napkin's going to peel off of anything that you're pulling the painter's tape from. I took some glossy Mod Podge to seal both of these pieces up together, and I love how this piece turned out. I love that the lights shine through our little bowl. I put some more lights, of course, in our little LED piece here. Add as much or as little as y'all want to this piece, or no lights at all inside of the bowl shining through. It's just a different little decoupage idea that, you know, I just had to toss in here. We're gonna start with the things I purchased. These didn't require any building or, you know, cutting of any kind. They're perfect just the way they are, and you can get them for $1.25 each at Dollar Tree. But we're going to push them to the side right now and take a gander at these little pieces I picked up from the store that shall not be named. I was in one of the stores and I had one of the employees approach me and tell me I was not allowed to film their store. I wasn't allowed to film in there. And I was like, okay, unfortunately, no more Dollar General. And for anyone wondering, I even confirmed this with their PR department. Kind of sad, I know. But we're still going to use these little gems today. I mean, they're $1 and they're going to fit perfectly for what I want them for. You can pop these suckers on their side. You can put them right next to one another, or you can have them facing forward. These are also perfect to put little transfers on, paint, or do stencils, which we're going to be doing. And make sure anytime that you're working with glass, you clean off your pieces before you get to going. I just use a little bit of alcohol on these. We're gonna make some cute little wall decor pieces by attaching these onto the wood pieces. You can use some E6000. I'm gonna use these little adhesives I have laying around. This way I can reuse these pieces later on down the line. I know I'm cheap, but listen, I gotta keep making DIYs for you. So this is how I get creative. If you want them to stay attached forever, use some E6000, a little bit of Gorilla Glue gel, you'll be good to go. These adhesives that give me the freedom to switch it out as I need to. People, I think these are super cute just the way they are, but since it's fall theme, I'm gonna take the stencil and take this distressed texture paste that I love from Tim Holtz. We don't need a lot for this. I love this stuff. It is inexpensive, it is non-toxic, it is super easy to use, and once it dries and you seal it, it is good to go. And it's super easy to make different colors when you want to mix them up and transform it into something other than white. So I'm taking a little bit of the Admiral Blue here and just smooshing everything together, and then simply pressing it right over top of our stencil. You don't need fancy schmancy tools for this. I just happen to have this laying around. But seriously, I love how simple this was to make and how high-end looking it turned out. On a recent trip to Dollar Tree, I found these little nesting boxes. That's what I'm calling them. I was like, I gotta pick these suckers up. I don't know what I'm gonna do with them, but look how cute this is. It's so tiny. It's smaller than my hand. I loved it. I was like, oh, it's so cute. But then I got to thinking, and I had a couple comments even suggest the same thing. We're gonna turn this into a tiered tray. I had this little square dowel hanging out from a trip to Hobby Lobby, and I'm like, this will work perfectly. I also had this little knob from Hobby Lobby laying around that I got on clearance for 99 cents. And then I'm like, we need some feet. So I just took some spackling, shoved it in the hole of these beads, and I let that dry. I did that off camera. I figured you guys, you know, knew how to shove spackling in a hole. You know what I mean? I think you got that. I wanted this to be large, so I measured to size, creating a tiered effect. The smallest being the largest, and then, you know, as it went up, it was a little bit shorter, you know, like this, okay? Since they were stained black, I decided to just paint over them with some more black. Just, you know, fresh coat of paint, never hurt nobody. Now it's time to work on our boxes. So we're going to take some water and a little bit of acrylic paints. I want to create like a grayish wash. So I'm mixing some brown and some gray together in this water to create a stain. This is going to allow us to not have a solid coverage over these wood pieces. So when it dries, you can still see the wood grain, which is a style that I just love. I love stain art. I love creating different variations of colors to blend in to wood. So this way you can see the natural aspects of the piece shine through. And to me, it just gives it a really high-end look, even if you just paid $1.25 for something. I wanted to seal these up just in case I wanted to set anything on here. And I'm going to use Dixie Belle's Easy Peasy Clear Matte Spray Wax. This stuff is eco-friendly, has a low odor. 30 minutes, it's ready to go, and you can start working with it. It's super easy to apply to things, and I really like the end finish. You can still feel the natural parts of the wood, but it gives a nice protection on your piece. Once it's all dry, you're ready to bring in the drill bit, okay? And you want to make sure that you bring in a drill bit that is big enough to house your dowel, if this is how you're choosing to go about it. I want this to be sturdy, so I'm going to drill a hole and I'm going to pop the dowel in there, but we need to find the center. And an easy way for us to do that is to take a ruler or anything with a straight line and set a catty corner and then put a little line in the center, and right where they crisscross is where your center piece is. And that's what I did for each one of these boxes. If you want to just glue yours together, by all means, go right ahead. I want this to be super sturdy, so I know applying the dowel inside the center and drilling holes inside of the wood pieces that we're going to be using in the center is going to really give me a nice hole. And you don't need a lot, just a little bit. You see how I just nip the back off? That's all I'm doing. I measured to size, and then I'm drilling a hole right in the center of our little square dowels. I make sure I measured these so that way they all fit in here perfectly, and then you're ready to bring in the hot glue. Psych! We're ready to bring in the wood glue, because that's just going to hold all this together better. And on a side note, people, sometimes I go through my footage and I'm like, what was I thinking in this moment? Like, I'm sure some of you can imagine, but that's besides the point. Okay, just cleaning up some crusty wood bits. For the bottom piece, I'm not going to put a dowel in this. I'm going to use a tiny little screw, and then I'm going to add in some wood glue to the bottom of the wood piece. So this way, when we're drilling our little screw, it will catch onto the wood, and then that wood glue is just going to really tie everything in together for the long haul. And do you need me to remind you to be careful? Okay. Be very careful holding the dowel and trying to drill. All right, safety first. One thing I like to share, if you don't know, is it's always good to grab those crusty bits you're collecting, because that's what I was doing, huh? I was grabbing all the crusty bits so we could use them to shove in our holes for our dowels. Okay, yeah. I don't know what else you guys were thinking, but that's what we were doing with them. Let me stop messing with y'all. But on a serious note, adding some little wood chips or little wood bits, your sanded pieces, into holes whenever you're doing stuff like this, it's going to seal up anything that might have a gap and just blend in with that wood glue and your dowel. So once it's sealed, everything is tight in there. There is no air gaps, allowing for possible breakage. So people, you know, gather all your little sandy bits up whenever you're doing projects like this. You never know what you could possibly use them for. I'm gonna wrap this tacky glue around the base of our knob here before I go plopping it into the hole. One, it dries clear, so I know that if anything seeps out, it's not going to be tacky and noticeable. Two, if you guys ain't used tacky glue, you really need to get some. This stuff means business. So the tier tray is not fall theme colored. However, it is fall theme decorated, and I love that it's versatile and you can exchange it out for all the seasons and all the holidays. And it's pretty sturdy, people. I'm really proud of how well this thing is put together. We're going to turn these scrap wood pieces I cut up in different sizes into a set of pumpkins. For the stem, I cut these little square dowels up into different sizes. You could use these, you know, you can grab them from Dollar Tree, whatever, you know, put whatever stems you want. Since these are set, we want them all to match, and I'm painting the backs of all of them black, and I'm using chalk paint and a little bit of water to just spread that out so it's not thick and chunky. Now it's time to bring in our napkin. Oh yeah, we are decoupaging these. Not all of them though, not the whole things, okay? I am not going to bore you. Instead, we're going to take this napkin and use it to incorporate all three of these into a set. If you've never decoupaged a napkin before, it's important to get all of them sneaky layers off the back. One of the easiest ways to do that is just to tear a corner and it reveals the layers. Usually it's 2-ply. Sometimes if you're lucky, it's 1-ply. And then you pull it completely off. So this way, we're just going to decoupage the top layer. You're in for a treat today, people, because normally whenever I decoupage large pieces, I cut it up and do it in sections. For this one, we're going to do the sides, the front, and not the back, the top and the bottom. So we're going to also want to make sure, see this pretty blue? We're going to want to make sure that that is showing somewhere in each section that we put this napkin out. So we can mix up some colors to put on our little square that we have over here. This way, the front of that little square pumpkin piece that we're making matches the color that is on the napkin. I wanted these pieces to be a little rustic, so I wasn't worried about solid coverage, and I like wood grain showing through, you know what I'm saying? Now be mindful, people, because if you're doing this and flicking your paintbrush near something else that is solidly painted, oh no, sprinkly bits. Yeah, I was just painting careless and free, and the next thing I knew, I was like, there's little blue dots on my black paint. So I said I didn't want these painted, you know, wasn't worried about full coverage. I also took a paper towel and wiped back any excess paint. I did the same thing with this rosy pinkish mauve color, I guess you would call it, and wiped it back as well. This just revealed a little bit of those, you know, wood grains underneath. And then I wanted to add a little bit of distressing with some dark colors just to really tie in all the colors that are in that napkin to really bring our little set here together. For our application, we're going to be using Deco Art Decoupage with the mat and a fan brush. I found the center of the napkin that had a little speck of blue on it and went from there. Because I'm going to be wrapping the napkin around our brick, that's what it looks like to me right now, brick. I found the center of the napkin that I wanted with the blues, so this way that's going to pop and incorporate our little blue block here right on the front. And then I took my little sponge. If you guys are not familiar with me, I like to use little cut pieces of dry sponge to press down on the outside of napkins when I decoupage them. It will grab excess Mod Podge that seeps through and help prevent additional wrinkling and things like that. I also like to go with a less is more kind of style and do section by section. You, on a project like this, if you want to do the iron-on method, that would work amazingly. That is definitely going to give you the most flawless coverage. But again, I was going for a little bit of a rustic look here. So if there was some wrinkles, lumps, and bumps, I wasn't going to be mad about it. I do recommend you cutting your corners just a little bit, like how I'm doing here, and popping them out, and then just measuring, just like you would if, you know, you're kind of wrapping a present. Measure your corners and stuff like that. Make sure that it makes sense. So this way, as you're wrapping your napkin, you're pressing each side down that it's going to cover. You know what I mean? If you just go ahead and try to actually wrap the napkin all the way around, it's going to overlap. And I did not want that. And trust me, when you see the end result, this came out flawless. The seams all met up really nice because you're also going to sand off any excess. And here's our little brick completely decoupage. So this is the only one that we're going to do the front and the sides and the top and the bottom. The back, again, remember, it's completely black. Now for our little pink one, we're just going around the outside with our napkin. We're going to do the top and on the sides. And remember, I'm trying to make sure I'm incorporating that blue so this way it ties in together. So I am making sure that I am placing it in just the right particular spot. Oh, on a side note, for anybody that wants to decoupage raw wood, I want to let you know a huge tip. The edges where you cut are usually very porous, so you're going to need extra Mod Podge in those spots. Keep that in mind. Once these dried, I went ahead and sanded all the excess off, and I added some of that little wood grain popping through. If you want to paint around the edges of yours white so your napkin pops out more, you go right ahead, but I really wanted this napkin to look like it was blended into the wood grain, and this turned out perfect for me. It just looks like it's melted into the wood. I wanted to get a little artsy fartsy with the leaves, okay? So I grabbed me a page out of a little Dollar Tree book and I cut out some little almond shaped leaf pieces. Then I cut little divots inside of the little leaves, so this way it gave it more of an authentic look to look like a leaf. And I thought that would just add to our rustic appeal. And I crinkled it up a little bit too. I was, you know, getting a little rough with our leaf here, you know, trying to just give it some character. And because I'm me, I'm like, let's add some Waverly Antique Wax, you know, to the edge. And then I was like, oh, too much. And it just was too much. Ow! I ripped my leaf. Of course I did. Of course I did. I decided to move on to our stems and also applied some Antique Waverly Wax to them while I had it out. And while they were drying, I brought in a stencil for us to apply a little raised stencil on the top with our wonderful Tim Holtz texture paste, okay? And it's always a good idea, if it is big enough, to tape your stencils down whenever you're doing a texture paste, because you really don't want anything smooshing underneath of that stencil. And I love this stuff as well because you do not have to do like a seamless coverage. It will have all kinds of textures and different looks and variations throughout it. I also gave our little blue pumpkin some love, and then I attached our stems and our little leaves using some hot glue and some tacky glue. To make sure these look really seamless, I did add a little bit of twine right around where the stem attached to our pumpkins. And in this reveal, they are sealed. I get asked that often, what do I seal over my projects with? A lot of times, if it is a craft like this, and I know it's not going to be in a heavily used area, I will happily take the very medium that I attached the napkin with and use that as my sealer. And I did the very same thing here. I just waited until the next day, so this way the napkin was completely dry and adhered to our wood pieces. These are absolutely my favorite pieces I've made so far this fall season. I love making book decor, and the shape of this design on the TDS Decoupage paper is perfect for this size book. I picked this up from Dollar Tree and just prepped it by painting it white, so this way our design on the print really popped. I'm using Mod Podge and a fan brush to apply our paper, and then just finding the center. I put just a little line in the center, so this way I could work one way and then work the other way on our print. This tissue paper is really easy to work with, but I still like to go little by little just to make sure I minimize any wrinkles or imperfections in it. And I'm just taking a piece of cling wrap here to apply our paper. When I was happy and it was completely dry, I took a sandpaper and just went around the edges, getting any excess off. And don't be afraid if you go over when you're doing something like this. The design, it just makes it look more authentic, like it is the book cover. For the spine, I wanted to create a little design on here, so I'm taking some of this Tim Holtz texture paste and mixing it on up to try and get that perfect color to match that pumpkin on the top of the design. If you're interested in using this paste, I do have an Amazon affiliate link down in the description box for it. I had several different fall stencils, but decided to use two different ones because the fall on this one wouldn't fit on the book, but the happy is the one that I actually liked on this one. So I taped it down, and it's always a good idea whenever you're doing a raised stencil to tape your piece down so it doesn't plop up. Doesn't always work out so wonderful, but for the most part it does. Just be patient, you know what I'm saying? A little bit of patience can go a long way doing stuff like this. I did have a few mistakes, and to fix that I just took a little dotting tool and scraped some of that excess of the raised stencil off, and then I grabbed the same paint that I used to prep our surface and went over the little sections that I scraped off, so this way it looked all nice and tidy. I added a few stamps on the top and took some of Dixie Belle's gilding wax to the spine of the book and around the edges, and this is probably one of my favorite fall pieces I've ever actually made. I love this book. People, as always, thank you all so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed this mega and these fall DIYs. Until next time, bye!